पिछले 4 दशकों से निर्मम आतंकवाद का दंश झेल रहा है। कितनी ही माताओं ने अपने बच्चे खोए और कितने बच्चे अनाथ हुए। हाल ही में हमने पहलगाम में टेररिज्म का बहुत ही घिनौना रूप देखा। इस दुख की घड़ी में जो मित्र देश हमारे साथ खड़े रहे, मैं उनका आभार व्यक्त करता हूं।
It does acquire a certain significance in a month where India's relations with the United States are going through some turbulence and going through a dip. So that acquires a special sort of context. This being any kind of anti-Western body. There was, in fact, a very private conversation that took place in the Russian car,
Yes.
in which
Both of them traveled
both
together.
the prime ministers traveled, the prime minister and the president traveled, and they spent almost an hour, I'm told, in that car. And it's important because the Russians have a tradition of not discussing sensitive bilateral issues in third countries. With China, we are at a different stage, that we are attempting a thaw in the relationship, which I would argue that overall, we remain strategic competitors. We are still not friends or even friendly neighbors, but we are trying to build a working relationship between India and China.
The Prime Minister of India has wrapped up his visit to China. He's on his way back to understand the nuances of the SCO meet, the positives, the negatives, and how the world views it and how India interprets it. I am joined by a distinguished diplomat, Mr. Ajay Bisaria. He has an experience of almost 35 years. He has served as High Commissioner of India to Canada between March 2020 to June 2022. He's also been High Commissioner in Pakistan, a very crucial country. He also represented World Bank in Washington, D.C. So we will get to know from him all the strategy and the economics also of this SCO meet. Sir, thank you so much for speaking to Indian Express. First things first, sir, I would like to know,
how do you interpret the SCO statement which has been put out?
Thank you. Yes, Neeta, the way I see this summit meeting is that it's one of the very important diplomatic forays that Prime Minister Modi has made. And the statement of the SCO has some significance, particularly because it has met India's expectations on its condemnation of terrorism and discussing the whole issue of cross-border terror. So I think it meets that test. You would recall that there was another SCO meeting of defense ministers where no statement issued because there was opposition to the formulations that India had put across. And now I think they are reflecting India's views and as also are consistent with the statement of the UN as well as of the G7 summit. So I think that's a positive. But I think the significance of this visit by Prime Minister Modi goes way beyond the SCO. The SCO is the platform. That is a platform that India is part of since 2016, and India attends these meetings. But I think the bilateral meetings on the sidelines with China and Russia also carry a very special meaning.
When you're talking about bilateral, we also saw that, there was a 45-minute meeting between the Prime Minister and Putin also. And then, they traveled in the same car. So what do you make of all this, images which were coming out from China?
Yes, so I think you have to deconstruct this and first look at the China meeting. The China meeting is sort of a continuation of a process that began with the Modi-Xi meeting in October last year at Kazan in Russia for the BRICS summit, on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. And there was a continuation of that process with the visit by Wang Yi, the Chinese special representative who was here and taking forward the discussion on the border problems that we've had with the Chinese. So I think the message from here is very significant. The message coming from the Chinese leader, which is that we are partners, not rivals. And I think the reality is somewhere in the middle. We will remain strategic competitors with China, but what might change is that we have a process of tactical adjustment that on typical issues on that bother us, like the boundary, as well as some of the irritants on trade. We might be able to wrinkle out those problems that exist in the relationship and go on to a healthy neighborly relationship, which is not based on trouble at the border.
So, but as a diplomat, how do you see that, in the statement, apart from Pahalgam was referred, but reference to Zafar Express and Khuzdar was also mentioned. So, as a seasoned diplomat who has also served in Pakistan, how do you view these three words which are there in the statement itself?
Yes, so I wouldn't be particularly concerned about that. And I'm guessing I have been a negotiator in some of these documents in the past. And I think the Indian negotiators did a good job by getting in the references of concern to India on Pahalgam.
Hmm.
And I don't think it's a big deal getting references on Jafar Express, because the world knows that behind Pahalgam was Pakistan. And that is something that is widely accepted, even if not widely stated publicly. Whereas the Jafar Express and other incidents that happen in Pakistan are seen as snakes in Pakistan's own backyard, but these are snakes that have been cultivated by Pakistan. And, some things related to the Balochistan Liberation Army and other such domestic insurgencies in Pakistan are seen to be insurgencies that exist within Pakistan. So I think the cross-border nature of Pahalgam is something that the world is familiar with, and beyond a point, this is optics. So India has reason to be satisfied with this outcome document and need not be too concerned about what else other countries might want to put as their concerns on terrorism. In fact, India's position remains that terrorism in all its forms and manifestations is to be condemned. So whether that terrorism happens in Pakistan or China, India would condemn it.
So the last paragraph, mentions missionary purposes. When it talks about these extremism, stress, and it also talks about attempts to use terrorist, separatist, extremist groups for missionary purposes. So what does that indicate? The last para.
Yeah, so I think that is the use of terrorists for mercenary purposes, which means you pay terrorists and use them. And
So what are they
this is
trying to
again
indicate?
code for yeah, so this is not necessarily used in the India-Pakistan context.
Okay.
This may have something to do with the context of the Russia-Ukraine war. Remember, there are multiple players on the table where in that war, mercenaries, that is paid soldiers, have been playing a role and acting as proxies. So it could possibly be a Russian formulation in the context of the Ukraine war.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for simplifying that, sir. So, what do you have to say about this SCO shifting focus from security to economics also? We have seen that China was more interested in economics of the SCO, while the Russians were more interested about the security aspect. Do you think that there's been some kind of a change, or the focus was terror only?
I think you have to see all these minilateral and plurilateral meetings as following a common kind of sort of direction. They have a certain political element because the political leaders of this country, all these countries and member states are meeting for a summit. So it is willy-nilly political. There is also an economic element to it because, they finally talk of economic cooperation and coordination. And the SCO also has a strong security component because it started off as an organization looking at border management and also looking at common security. It has a structure called RATS, which is a regional anti-terrorism structure. So all these elements come together, and each country will focus on something that is of interest of it at that point of time, given its history. For India, talking of countering terrorism is important because we are meeting in the wake a few months after the Pahalgam incident. And similarly, for each country, Russia would have concerns about the Russia-Ukraine war, and that would inform its whole behavior in the organization, and so on. So I think in drafting a sort of declaration that comes out of a summit, all these are pulled together. There are some things that some countries object to, which where they look for a consensus. But I think that is the way to go in this. So I don't think we should overinterpret any particular formulation that comes in.
So, what role does SEO play in promoting a multipolar world, and how does it align with or challenge Western led institutions? Because, some critics also say that China has been trying to establish its hegemony, through SEO. So, how do you view that?
It is no doubt a China-led and China-dominated body, but India went into the SCO with its eyes open. Part of the reason was that Russia, which was in it along with China originally, wanted India in to be able to balance the Chinese domination of this structure. So I think from the West point of view, it is positive to have India on this table because India becomes a link between
Okay.
these non-Western countries and the countries of the West. So this is not necessarily an anti-West grouping because when India's in the room, India is very much a strong partner of several Western nations. It cannot be called an anti-Western grouping. It can possibly be called a non-Western grouping. And, it does acquire a certain significance in a month where India's relations with the United States are going through some turbulence and going through a dip. So that acquires a special sort of context, this being any kind of anti-Western body.
So, Mr. Putin has said that he should not be blamed for the war. In fact, he laid all the blame as far as the war where it is going on Ukraine. So, how do you interpret his statement? Saying that he's not responsible for war, and in fact, Ukraine is.
Well, this has been Putin's long-standing position. This has been the Russian position. They give a certain historical context to it, and there is some justification to that about NATO's eastward expansion in the 1990s and the role of Western intelligence agencies in trying to change the regime in Ukraine. So I think all this creates a sort of a backdrop, and in the Russian narrative, it didn't really start with what Russia did. Russia reacted to what was happening in Ukraine with the support of the West. But having said that, I think the important other statement that Putin made was that he thanked China and India for the role they played. He indicated that the Trump process or the Alaska process, it has been positive. So we see some end in sight to this war that has gone on for too long, and the fact that India is ready to play a constructive role has also been acknowledged by Putin. So I think all that is positive.
So, last question: what is your assessment of SCO's ability to mediate regional conflicts, such as India and Pakistan? Obviously, what role do they play?
Well, I think India would see no role for any of these organizations in mediating conflict. Now, there could be some conflicts where both parties agree that the SCO can play a role in trying to resolve issues. That's how it came about it as an organization that could resolve boundary issues. But when countries or member countries appeal to the SCO to help, it can certainly help. But in the India-Pakistan context, there is no real role. At best, they can have a role in amplifying India's message to Pakistan that it should stop cross-border terrorism, which was what India's diplomacy was about. That can partner and friendly countries who have good relations with both India and Pakistan press Pakistan to stop its behavior of supporting cross-border terrorism. And I think that would remain the Indian position in all of this. But you were mentioning Russia, and another very significant outcome that came out of the Modi-Putin meeting today was that the dates of the annual summit have been announced, and Putin would be in India in December for the annual India-Russia summit. And there was, in fact, a very private conversation that took place in the Russian car,
Yes.
in which
Both of them traveled
both
together.
prime ministers traveled, the prime minister and the president traveled, and they spent almost an hour, I'm told, in that car.
Yeah.
And it's important because the Russians have a tradition of not discussing sensitive bilateral issues in third countries because they feel there could be bugs, there could be people listening in, intelligence agencies listening in. So they had the safe space of the Russian beast, as it's called, the Russian beast, which is the car that Putin brings wherever he goes. And they could have a summit level meeting almost for an hour in that, and where some sensitive issues could have been discussed.
So you clearly say that the bilateral between Putin and Prime Minister Modi was much more of a significance as compared to the Chinese counterpart?
No, I would say both were very significant because with Putin, with Russia, India had a consistently positive relationship. There have been exchanges of delegations and we've been speaking. But with China, we are at a different stage, that we are attempting a thaw in the relationship, which I would argue that overall, we remain strategic competitors. We are still not friends or even friendly neighbors, but we are trying to build a working relationship between India and China. But with India and Russia, we already have a friendly relationship where we have a great deal of understanding, and we saw the working of Russian equipment, defense equipment during Op Sindoor, which gave India a very strong military edge during those operations as well.
But when we speak about Operation Sindoor, we also saw that how China helped Pakistan. There were a credible amount of evidences which were put forward by many countries also. So how do you view that?
Absolutely. So this is certainly a point India would have made to China, that the irritants in the relationship are, the first irritant continues to be the situation on the border. There is not peace and tranquility. The peace and tranquility has been missing since the summer of 2020, and we haven't yet gone to the status quo ante of April 2020. So we need more disengagement. We need more demobilization of troops, but that process is on. So that would continue. But the second irritant is the collusive nature of the battlefield that we saw during Op Sindoor, that the Pakistanis were using Chinese offensive and defensive equipment. So they were not only trying to attempt, in a sense, terrorism under the umbrella of Chinese protective equipment. So this would certainly be an important conversation between India and China. And the third problem has been the weaponization of trade. There's a trade deficit, and China does not hesitate to turn off the tap and weaponize that trade, because various things like tunnel boring machines and magnets, which are important and critical to India, were stopped at one point. They've been resumed now. but all these irritants will remain in the relationship, do remain. But what the two countries are now demonstrating with this visit is they both have the desire to manage these problems and have a better relationship. So that is the process I think we see unfolding.
So thank you so much for explaining the entire the matrix to us and taking time for Indian Express, taking the time out. Thank you, sir.